There is potentially huge paradigm shifting news that just dropped about U.S. soccer, and obviously I'm going to talk about it. Now I'm sorry I forgot my American beanie, so this is an American guy without a beanie talking about all this, but it is massive news, not necessarily related to the last time that I went on an American guy rant, but it's news that gives me hope and makes me incredibly nervous. We'll see how those two balance out as we go through it. But essentially, the United States Soccer League, or whatever, the USL, the United Soccer League, it has announced that it will be attempting to create a first division team. Now, this is really unnecessarily complex in the United States, because there is no promotion and relegation. There are only a few countries in the world that do this, Australia being one, where they have to basically assign top league status and lower league status to different leagues. The people that do this are the FA, so the FA of the United States, or the Soccer Association of the United States, assigns what level each league is. It literally is just a stroke of a pen on a piece of paper that says MLS is the top division league in the United States. USL Championship is the second division. USL League One is the third division. And USL does have 3 tiers. It does not have, however, promotion and relegation. That was the immediate question that's being asked here, but I'm going to sort this all out for you. The issue is that because there's not promotion and relegation, you can do a certain number of things to gain Division One status from the FA. There have been leagues that have done this before, and at various points in the history of soccer in the United States, stretching back a pretty long amount of time, there have been multiple Division One registered leagues in the United States, but they're not necessarily registered. Now, I always had this mental image, whether rightly or wrongly, that MLS and the U.S. Federation were in bed together. Maybe literally, honestly, that they were working together to kind of enforce this cabal that the MLS seems to be running. Now, the MLS, so I keep saying the MLS, but they want, it's technically just MLS. The MLS just feels so much better, so my apologies for saying it to anybody that is offended by it. If you are, though, sorry. I know the right way to say it. I'm just busy thinking about other things than making sure the is not in front of MLS. But MLS has done a bunch of amazing things for U.S. soccer. It went through a very difficult time and managed to survive, and has managed to create a system of rules that have helped develop talented young players and allow superstars to come over and play and try and drive interest in the game that way, but not make the league entirely dependent on superstars in a way like China or Saudi Arabia, where maybe it's not necessarily as sustainable, certainly economically. I don't want to discredit all of that stuff that MLS has done, because they have done a lot of great stuff. But as is typically the case, and as I would highlight is the case in women's soccer in the United States as well, the thing that saved it, and the thing that created it, and the thing that nurtured it, is now the thing holding it back. On the women's side, this would be collegiate soccer, which gave tons of women the opportunity to play because of Title IX, which is a law that mandates that every university has to have the same number of scholarship athletes on the men's and women's side, but that means there have to be more women's sports because American football takes up a lot of men's scholarships, and soccer is a very easy sport for those schools to create. As a result, the United States had by far the world's largest farm system for women's soccer talent, because it just was giving a ton of women the opportunity to play the game at a pretty high level, at a competitive Division I level in college, before really any other country in the world. But now it's kind of holding the women's national team back a little bit, because every other country's catching up, and they're kicking their academy systems into gear that are clearly better at developing talent than the collegiate soccer system. And, once you have those two things competing at the same level, U.S. women's soccer has got to find a way to adapt. And the league's gotten better, and it's professionalizing more and more, and they're trying. Where MLS is the same thing. It nurtured and brought to good health professional men's soccer in the United States through very dark and dangerous times. But now the way MLS has been able to exist and able to build itself up, to me, feels like it is holding the game back at certain points. Because the United States is a massive country of 350 million people. It is a country that is the size of continental Europe, physically, discounting Siberia, right? And there is a huge amount of distance to travel and a lot of different communities that are not exposed to professional soccer through MLS. Even though the top division has 30, 31, 32 teams, right? That they keep adding teams to it. There just isn't, I mean, you really can't cover the entire United States with one top league. The only way you'd be able to cover it with professional soccer is to have a promotion and relegation that divides into regional sides, basically second division on down. And this is what USL's been working on. They've built the championship, they built League One, they built League Two, where it gets amateur and very regional. And they have long said, the guy that runs it, I can't remember his name for the life of me, something McDonough, Paul McDonough, who's the chief soccer officer and USL president. He has long said that their goal is long-term to get to promotion and relegation, which I think would take the game to a completely new level and give people that it would scratch the itch and would allow clubs all over the country. You could have a club in Anchorage, Alaska that if it gets its shit together and develops talent, it could try and work its way up. And there's so many amazing sporting stories that are available in that. The problem is MLS, in order to survive, has become very, very good at crushing anything that's not MLS. Right, their entire philosophy and what the owners buy into is that there is the MLS world and then there is out of the MLS world. And MLS is structured completely differently. The owners don't own their clubs; they own shares in the league, basically. And then the league, assigns the club, right, that you own. And so it is a very sewn together league, and it is able to punch with incredible force because the clubs are not acting individually. It is the league that is swinging as a giant cohesive fist full of, like $1 billion that's able to knock out other leagues. USL's been able to survive in spite of this. Okay, USL has actually managed to sell players for millions of dollars to different leagues and has managed to keep itself economically viable, thus proving, in my opinion, that there are communities that are underserved or not served at all by MLS that should be. And the only way they can be is to have a league system far bigger than what MLS intentions to create, at least as far as we know. Right? I've heard some rumors that MLS would like to create a second division and then create a still closed system of MLS that's basically two divisions with promotion and relegation, and that would be better. But there are a lot of clubs with, frankly, pretty significant history that play in USL that are rugged and individual and have that kind of rugged individual identity where MLS has this patina and sheen, at least over the top of it, of sameness and corporateness, right? Which is off-putting to people both inside the United States and outside of it. There are great fan cultures in MLS. I've made videos about them. One of the hidden grounds we made was about NYCFC, and I loved it. But there are other fan base. I've been to games in Portland and Seattle, right? And there are great fan bases in these places with great traditions and connections in a way that would feel familiar to people from all great sporting cultures around the world. It would. There's somebody that gets to walk in both of those worlds. But there is that patina. There is that corporate stranglehold that MLS has on the game that I'm surprised USL seems to be very confident and believes that it will get that first division status. The plan is for this league to start in 2027 or 2028. The idea is that it will then ride the coattails of the World Cup, which will drive interest even further. I'm of the belief that the home World Cup is going to be life-changing for a lot of sports fans in the United States because they're going to be exposed to the world of soccer. All right, the last couple of World Cups in the U.S. that the U.S. has qualified for have been huge deals. A lot of my friends that know I talk about soccer all day, texting me, asking me who the best players are. We're all going to the bars together, guys that never watched a soccer game in their life. I mean, if there's one thing that all Americans can get behind, when Americans are competing in sports, we come out in force. It's George Washington, it's bald eagles, it's, like the United States is very good at doing nationalism via sports. We just are. Sport is such an integral part of our culture, but normally it's so insular. And then you get the Olympics, and that's when, we get to take on Russia and China and like all that, it's very ingrained, right? You watch movies like Miracle about the 1980 U.S. men's Olympic hockey team, and you get this like patriotism. That's that's an eagle, right? That's the noise an eagle makes, obviously. And having that World Cup on home soil is going to be huge. But I'm afraid for the USL because the USL has been able to do what it's doing very well. It has been able to create a sustainable league structure that could accommodate promotion and relegation at some point, right? With a second division, a third division, and semi-pro amateur fourth division. But now that you start to put yourself up against MLS, you put yourself in extreme danger, right? MLS is a predator, all right? MLS is not an entity that I believe is out for necessarily the best of the game. They're out for the best of MLS, right? I mean, if you were some sort of omniscient being, right, that controlled everything, you would not be doing the things MLS is doing if you were trying to fully just grow the game in the United States. MLS wants to grow the game, but they want to grow the game just within them. I mean, they literally pulled MLS teams out of the US Open Cup, which is a decision that drives me completely insane. It's the oldest footballing competition in the U.S. It's been going on over 100 years. And yeah, for certain stretches of that, it was like just semi-pro teams playing in it. But it at least is an old, historic competition that's like the FA Cup. It is the Open Cup of football, of soccer in the United States that has existed since before the first ever World Cup. Since before Uruguay was winning the Olympic football tournaments in the 1920s, the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Trophy, like U.S. Open Cup, it existed. And they pulled all of their first teams out of it. And their main competition in that tournament was USL. It was clubs from the different USL leagues that would show up and make the semis, make the finals even of that tournament, playing against MLS clubs who, granted, were rotating their squads a little bit in the early rounds, as anybody does in a cup competition. But now it's just MLS reserve teams. Right, that was already a move to kind of disrespect and not give USL clubs any opportunity at all to play against MLS opposition. Maybe that motivated this decision, I don't know. But USL may be thinking that MLS started the war by pulling out of the US Open Cup. They're going for it. Now, they did say, I don't think of it as a threat to MLS. I think we're just going to go and do our business. Basically, like they're ignoring MLS and they're just going to do this because they're building their network of clubs. And I'd imagine the way you form this first division is you promote some more successful teams from the championship. You have some people come in and invest and create more clubs. And of course, in USL's structure, it's like everywhere else in the world, basically, where you own, there are clubs and then there are the owners that own those clubs and run those clubs. And it's a lot more individualistic and able to create those more unique identities, whether it be Louisville, sorry, my grandpa who's from Kentucky would be very upset with that. Louisville is the way you're supposed to say it, that has a very professional feel and thousands of dudes at their, thousands of people at their games. You have other teams in the championship that are basically not reserve teams, but kind of developmental teams. But that's all cool. They don't really care. That's the league. They're going to play it how you play it. And now they're going to go for first division. I hope they pull it off. And I know they won't. But I hope MLS doesn't fight it. All right. Now, there is a precedent, okay, for multiple top division leagues merging into one in the United States. The NFL is made up of two conferences, the AFC and the NFC. That's because it used to be the NFL and the AFL, the American Football League, but they were competing against each other. Then they merged, and the champion of each of those leagues played in the Super Bowl. That's how that started. All right. In baseball, it was the National League and the American League, and they merged. And there's still actually a pretty significant difference. So there was, at least until recently, between those two leagues, even in the rules of the game. One had a designated hitter, one didn't. So the pitcher had to hit in the National League, then you had a designated hitter in the American League. It was weird. In the World Series, it depended on whose stadium you were playing in, right? But that was two leagues that merged. It happened in basketball as well. There were two different leagues that merged to create the NBA. All right, now that's since kind of been erased from the ledger. Now they divided it into regional conferences, the West and the East, but the legacy is still there. Would MLS ever do something like that? I don't think so. I think the most likely outcome here is that MLS agrees to some sort of deal with I don't know what it would be. Like, I don't know where we would be headed. MLS would have to completely redo its entire corporate structure to allow itself to combine with anything. So it is foolish in the short term to think that MLS is going to be combining with or instituting pro rel with USL. So USL will just be creating a direct competitor, whether they look at it that way or not, with MLS. But if USL is able to do that and create a top league and somehow get the federation to give the league that status so that they're playing in CONCACAF Champions League, right? So that they are, working with more money and getting more subsidies from the federation, right? That they're able to do all of these things. And then they're able to institute pro rel. Let's say 10, 15 years down the line, you could start to make MLS look like a dinosaur that isn't really working with the people. But the problem is, in order to get to that point, you have to beat the MLS at a game. You have to beat MLS at a game that they're unbelievably good at playing, which is whack-a-mole. MLS devours leagues like this. There used to be a lot more. Now it's just USL. And again, USL is very viable. They're not like in trouble and this is their last Hail Mary. But they're going for it. And I'm sure in their offices they believe they got a good shot at it. But it's going to be pretty wild once this starts dropping. This sort of corporate back and forth that goes on between MLS and USL. I, for one, hope that against all of my logical understanding of this situation, they can work out some sort of deal that will benefit soccer in the United States long term. I don't even know how that would begin to happen, but I hope that it does. I really do. Because if it doesn't, and then USL ends up getting crushed by MLS to a point that the entire USL league system evaporates, all we will be left with is MLS. And the teams that are in it now, or just adding one team every couple of years, is just not enough to serve a country the size and the scope of the United States. There needs to be a football league system in the United States, and there needs to be a way that MLS is able to reconcile all of that it has done and its corporate structure that is designed in a way to support itself and soccer in the United States with providing the United States with an actually appropriate number of football clubs at professional and semi-professional levels so that we have a team to go to. Because the real crux of this is that if you were at the front door of the house that I grew up in, there isn't a professional football league within an hour and a half drive on a highway. And I grew up in Tampa, Florida, the 13th biggest media market in the United States. There needs to be more clubs, and there is an audience for them. If you can have professional league systems in places like Ireland, in places like Bosnia and Herzegovina, right, who have a team doing very well right now in European competition. If you can have these types of league systems in a place like Iceland, right, that allows for the development of players, that blankets a country that is blanketed by ice, then you should be able to support small-level semi-pro and professional teams in tons of towns in the United States. And I hope that that somehow is what ends up coming out of this.